Yo, 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 what is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and I thought it would be nice just to do a separate video on the kingdom power caps as it pertains to migration. So what are the thresholds at? We're going to be showing you that for every single season on how many players, potentially, but really more so talking about what is the power cap, right? How much power does a kingdom need to get to before it goes to full status? And we're going to show you that for each season. We're going to talk a little bit about it. So as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us up because it helps out a lot. So let's first and foremost start with, and again, for those of you who watched the video yesterday, it may have been yesterday, the day before, where we did our big kind of migration topic conversation and deep dive. We did show this off a little bit towards the end. However, if we're starting with Season of Strife, now keep in mind that these kingdoms also were in Belleron Season 2, and so most of the data that you're going to see here is really relevant or prevalent to that. I ended up pulling all this data 2 days ago, at least as of recording this, on the 25th of July. So you can see here that for these kingdoms, which is 119 kingdoms, 1 through 10, 22 through 90, 213 through 214, 213 through 240, 277 through 288, they end up seeing for lines that aren't, or if it doesn't have a activity status here, that just means it's full. So you could see here that as we kind of get down to the muddy middle of it, which is that you have some crowded kingdoms as high as 21.6 million, and then some full kingdoms as low as 19.6. Now maybe this could mean that some players ended up leaving, maybe ended up removing some troops, etc. Right? Maybe they were full, they got out of it, but maybe the status hasn't changed, even though we have seen that status has been pretty real time in how it adjusts. So for whatever reason, part of this is I find a little bit kind of unexplanatory or just unable to be explained, as it were. However, what we do know, and I think what we can take away from this, is that the cap is probably somewhere between 20 and 22 billion power. So once you probably hit 20, that's really where you probably have to understand that now you're getting closer to the amount of power you can bring in, which again will also depend on how many players you want to bring in with that power, right? So, and this is the important thing, is that when you're looking at migration, it really needs to be looked at as the amount of power you're bringing in, not looking at it as the amount of players that you're bringing in. So an example would be, if we go and we take a look at the migrations for certain kingdoms during the pre-war season, instead of looking at this and saying, oh, well, there's 300 people I can bring in, right? Or there's 252 people out of 300, right? That means I can bring in 300 people. Remember that it's not really the spaces remaining, it's the power of the individuals that you're bringing in that will determine if you end up going from something like crowded to full, active to crowded, normal to active, etc. And so that's really what I hope the focus of today's video is going to be on, is just to educate yourselves and to be aware of that is really what it actually is, and the spaces remaining is just kind of a superficial thing there, right? Now, you could potentially bring in 300 people, but it really is determined based on whatever the kingdom cap is. And so I, again, just really want to hammer that point home. If we go to the next season, to Belleron Season 2, right? To kingdoms that are going into Belleron Season 2, they should have the same threshold cap as the ones that are in Season of Strife. However, as of yesterday's video, or whenever that we may have watched that video where we talked about the migration situation, that is just not the case. However, the numbers that we're seeing here are pretty consistent, right? You could see a lot of the crowded kingdoms under 20 bill, but once we kind of get to around 21 or so, they're full. 110 was able to go from full to crowded, but they're back at full, at least again as of recording this video. So we can surmise that it's probably 20 to 22 billion for Belleron Season 2. Again, I'll pull more data and we'll kind of see how that goes moving forward, if that is going to end up being the case, or if we maybe get some more smaller windows or margins for data on future kingdoms. If we look at Tamaris Season 1, we can see that the cap for crowded is around 12. However, you see 11.4, 12.2, 13.3. These are full kingdoms, as high as 12.3 for crowded. So it's probably around 12, right? I would gauge 12 to 12.5 is probably what we're really looking at. But once you get to 12, you're probably in that range of, okay, I probably need to be a little bit more careful now. And again, that's for kingdoms 241, 264, right? When we ended up pulling the data just a few days ago. So again, if you're coming up to that, right, be a little weary, if you will. If we get to Belleron Season 1, kingdoms that are in the pre-war server that were factored into this was 289 through 312. And you could see here that the crowded kingdoms, as high as 11.8, but we have full kingdoms at 11.1, 12.6. So I think it's fair to say that we're probably looking at about 11 to 12, which again could be about the same as well, even if we averaged it around 12 so far for when you're hitting. So I think Belleron Season 1 and Tamaris Season 1 are either the same or they're very close, or one might be 11 and the other might be 12. Then we end up getting to the next season, which is Pre-Strife. Now, we do know that from what CoD CS has said publicly is that the Belleron Season 1, Tamaris Season 1, and Belleron Season 2 are going to be going into Pre-Strife for Season of Strife once this season finishes, and then we're going to end up having an amazingly large pool in Season of Strife, and hopefully that pool will be the second largest pool outside of the 119 kingdoms that we showed you that are currently in Season of Strife, and then eventually maybe those will align at some point going forward, and then who knows what they're going to end up doing with these side seasons. Will they just remove them, and like they did when Season 2 came out, and then any of like the 1+, 1++ seasons just kind of went away, and then it was just 1 to 2, and then they ended up going 2++++, right? We know that definitely will happen with Season 3, but it kind of feels like they're already prepping that for Season of Strife. So Pre-Strife, you could see everyone was crowded here, right? So no one hit full with as high as 13.3 and 11.2 billion, right? Being a little bit higher than Belleron Season 1. If we then go into Season 2 and Season 1, you can see here that no one was full in Season 2 and no one was full coming out of Season 1 and going into that pre-war phase. And we could see from Season 2 that 9.3 being the highest, 8.3, 8.1. Now, the interesting part here, and this is the thing that we talked about in the previous video. Excuse me. Okay, good. I think I was able to just lubricate the lungs a little bit. Is that what I find interesting is how kingdoms that have the strongest, and just for these two specific kingdoms, with 329 and 330, where the strongest alliance there was 768 million power, and then the other one in 330 was 484 million power, these kingdoms were still considered crowded, when we know that activity status should be updating in real time because it has been. And so why is it that a kingdom that is that low on power and probably is more inactive than it is active is still considered crowded, but on the top end, it just, I look at this and I think to myself, this should be normal status kingdom, not a crowded kingdom, right? And then we look at Season 1, and some of the kingdoms coming out of Season 1, with the highest being 383 at 6.3 billion, 376 at 5.4, and then 5.2, right? So again, no one's full for Season 1, Season 2, and Pre-Strife, right? So nobody was full. The fulls started at Belleron Season 1. So I look at this and we see 6.3, 5.4, 5.2, right? I mean, again, you can kind of see, some of those numbers are decent, right? Where you look at like the Season 2, they're kind of lining up with some Pre-Strife. Even the 9.3 is kind of close to the 9.7, right? 298, right? Where you're kind of a full season ahead at that point. So again, it's interesting to see that like no one's really kind of hitting the threshold going into Season 1 and Season 2, and maybe it's because they set it high enough where no one's really kind of reaching that. Is that a good or a bad thing? We'll kind of have to see as time goes on. But that pretty much sums up everything on if you're curious at kind of what those thresholds are going to be for every season, at least how they are now, or if this will just end up being used as a reference point to reflect back if they end up making any other adjustments going forward. Everyone kind of knows what they were at one point. I would love to know what you guys think about all this. Do you kind of agree or disagree with the thresholds at each of the seasons? Do you think maybe some are a little bit too high? Maybe some should be a little bit higher? Would love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments down below. That's going to do it for me. As always, until next time, we'll catch you later.